If you had walked past Jane Birkin on a Paris street in 1975, you might not have noticed her at first. No entourage, no designer logos, just a young woman in worn jeans and a white shirt, carrying a wicker basket like she'd just come from a farmer's market. But look closer. Photographers were everywhere, capturing her every move. That basket, those simple clothes, that tousled hair, somehow, they mattered more than all the couture in the world. This is the story of how a shy English actress became the most influential style icon of the 20th century, breaking fashion rules at every turn. How a woman who rejected luxury accidentally inspired its most expensive symbol. How scandal turned into legacy, and how one person's authenticity created a movement that still defines what we call chic today. Jane Mallory Birkin was born in 1946 into a London family that kept things polite and private. Her father had been a Navy commander. Her mother worked as an actress, which meant young Jane often watched rooms bend toward a performer while she stayed quiet in corners. She married at 18. The groom was John Barry, a composer on his way to fame, and for a moment, it looked like a traditional story. Wedding, a baby daughter named Kate, a neat path. The marriage dissolved within a few years, and Birkin found herself a young single mother trying to step out of her mother's shadow while also stepping into it. Her breakthrough came through vulnerability made visible. In 1966, Michelangelo Antonioni cast her in Blow Up, an art house film about a photographer hunting for truth in images. Birkin appeared in an unclothed scene. The film counted among the first mainstream releases to include full exposure. Critics called the movie daring. Some called it obscene. Birkin seemed almost surprised that anyone cared. Another small role followed in Wonderwall, a psychedelic film where she played a model trapped in a photographer's lens. A pattern emerged. Parts that exposed her, literally and figuratively. London in the 1960s rewarded this kind of courage. The city was shedding post-war caution, and young people with long hair and short hemlines were rewriting rules. With doe eyes and a willingness to be seen, Birkin entered that swinging 60s current, wayfish, free-spirited and unguarded in ways that felt both innocent and unsettling. She was still learning her own language, still figuring out what it meant to be herself in public. The family's living room carried scripts, playbills, and careful manners. She absorbed timing from backstage whispers and learned how a small gesture could move an audience. Silence had been her early armor. Later, she used presence instead. London gave her more than work. It gave her a rhythm. Bands played in basements, designers cut skirts higher each month, and old rules lost volume. Birkin stepped into that noise with a kind of lightness that drew notice before words did. In 1968, Birkin auditioned for a French film called Slogan. She spoke almost no French. The director asked questions she barely understood. She smiled, stumbled through responses, and hoped her face could carry what her vocabulary could not. Across the room sat Serge, an eccentric singer-songwriter known for brilliance and self-destruction. He watched her audition. Something clicked. She got the role. She also met the partner who would shape the next phase of her life. At 22, Birkin made a decision that sounded reckless to friends. She packed up her toddler daughter and moved to Paris permanently. Not for a studio deal. Not for a mapped career plan. For a man she had just met, in a language she could not yet speak. In a city where she knew almost no one, Paris in the late 60s carried its own codes, its own relationship with beauty and dissent. Where London felt young and chaotic, Paris felt ancient and knowing. The city had seen revolutions before and expected arrivals to shape up fast. Birkin arrived unformed, uncertain, and willing. Gainsbourg became her bridge into this world, and also her collaborator. She did far more than pose as a muse. She joined him in an artistic dare. He wrote songs that fit her breathy, girlish register. She inhabited his provocations as if they began inside her. Together, they built a reputation that made headlines across Europe. The English rose had taken root in French soil. What grew next carried its own strange bloom. Paris answered with different music. Cafes hummed with talk about politics and poetry. The year carried its own unrest, and the city expected conviction from anyone who wanted a seat at the table. Birkin learned by watching. and then by performing, building vocabulary on set and in studios. Gainsbourg encouraged risk, but the risks felt like ideas she already understood. They began to write a shared myth in plain sight. The public kept returning for the next chapter, waiting to see how far the pair would go and what new image would test the limit. The song began as a private game between lovers. Gainsbourg wrote Je t'aime, moi non plus for Brigitte Bardot, who chose to keep it in a drawer, too explicit for release. In 1969, he re-recorded it with Birkin. The track opened with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Then came Birkin's voice, whispering French phrases in a breathy, half-singing line that sounded like someone drifting between sleep and waking, and then suggestive audio cues, soft gasps, murmured phrases, the kind of private sounds people expect to remain unheard. Radio stations panicked. The Vatican issued a denunciation. Italy banned it. Spain followed. In the UK, the original label withdrew the single under public pressure, and another label picked it up. France allowed it late at night, and shops sold it only to adults over 21. The uproar made it a sensation. Je t'aime, moi non plus rose to #1 on the UK charts, the first foreign-language single to do so. Suddenly, Jane Birkin was no longer simply an actress in a provocative romance. She stood at the center of a culture fight about boundaries and desire Gainsbourg kept pushing. Birkin posed for a magazine shoot, secured to a radiator prop, while his text described her as "my little hermaphrodite." She performed a new stage piece he called La Décadence, which included him placing his hands on her chest before live audiences. In 1976, he directed a film bearing the song's title. Birkin played a boyish truck stop waitress in a relationship that blurred lines many considered fixed. The adult content chilled parts of her acting career for a time. Through it all, Birkin did not flinch. Where others might have calculated the risk, she said yes. She treated intimacy and sensuality as forms of honesty. It felt less like provocation and more like a refusal to pretend. A young woman in love with a complicated man, exploring the edges of what art and closeness could hold. She carried an English sense of reserve, shy smiles, girlish fringe, paired with a continental boldness that set her apart from the bombshells of the previous decade. Neither Bardot's voluptuous swagger nor Anna Karina's cerebral cool fit. Birkin brought something quieter and stranger, sweetness with a disarming openness. People kept watching. Records sold in brown paper sleeves handed across counters as if they carried contraband. People argued about art, decency, and the sound of a woman breathing on a pop single. Clergy condemned it. Teenagers memorized it. Couples played it in apartments where thin walls turned neighbors into witnesses. The storm did not scare her. It taught her where the lines stood and how to cross without apology. Work narrowed for a season, yet the persona grew sharper. She could stand still and provoke debate because the image had gathered a thrum of meaning around it. While the love affair drew headlines, something quieter changed the culture. Photographers began trailing Birkin through ordinary days, not for set pieces, but to see what she wore to run errands. Her style formed like handwriting, personal and distinct. Repetto ballet flats, or sometimes bare feet. High-waisted vintage jeans worn to softness. White t-shirts or men's button-downs untucked and loose, lacy camisoles with nothing over them, sheer dresses without a bra that scandalized older generations and thrilled younger ones, and always that wicker basket on her arm. The basket felt like a manifesto. Paris carried leather handbags from the grand houses. Birkin carried something from a street market, the sort of thing used for bread at a village stall. She took it everywhere. To film sets, to clubs, even to red carpets. Whimsical, impractical, and completely wrong for official glamour. Yet perfect for the life she lived. This had no playbook behind it. Birkin disliked anything too prim. She gathered clothes slowly and wore favorites until they fell apart, mixing a vintage Yves Saint Laurent blazer with jeans whose knees had gone soft. Fashion editors called it unstudied nonchalance, which landed close while missing the heart of it. She wore only what felt true. The authenticity translated. Her outfits were simple enough for anyone to emulate. A white shirt and jeans required no fortune. Young women across Europe cut wispy bangs, hunted vintage, and carried baskets. They chased something elusive, beauty that appears by accident. The irony sat in plain sight. Birkin truly did not fuss, and that is why the look worked. On most others, it performed as costume. On her, it read as a day in life. The French tagged it Le Style Jane Birkin. Historians later traced much of French girl chic, fringe, minimal makeup, mariniere stripes, perfectly worn denim, back to her template. She kept building a career in France as an actress and singer. She released albums and performed in her soft, half-spoken style. Yet street photographs of daily movement, Birkin leaving the apartment at the market, racing for a train, carried the broader influence. She helped seed the idea now called street style, fashion that unfolds in real life, not just on runways. Clothes matter most when lived in. Her partner Jacques Doyon eventually ran over the beloved basket with his car in the early 1980s. Some linked it to jealousy of its symbolism. The object vanished. The image endured. Editors clipped those candid frames and pasted them into drawers that would become inspiration boards. Wardrobes shifted. A striped knit or a boy's shirt told a new story when paired with scuffed shoes and washed denim. The code spread because it felt legible. Friends remember that she shared clothes freely. A jacket lent to a colleague, a shirt offered to a costume assistant, a basket holding someone else's keys for an afternoon. The ease traveled with the objects. When strangers copied the look, they copied the attitude too, even if only for a day. In 1983, Birkin boarded a flight from Paris to London with a straw basket stuffed with papers and cosmetics. Her seatmate, a well-dressed man she did not recognize, watched as she tried to slide the basket into the overhead, its contents spilled. Lipsticks rolling, papers scattering. She sighed. "I can never find a proper weekend bag," she muttered. "Why don't you make a bag that's 4 times the size of the Kelly and half the size of a suitcase?" The man smiled. "I'm Jean-Louis Dumas," he said. "I run Hermes." He asked her to sketch what she meant. Right there, on an air sickness bag, Birkin drew her ideal hold-all. Rectangular, roomy, with convenient pockets and short handles. To her, it was just a casual complaint. To Dumas, it was inspiration. A few weeks later, Hermes presented her with a custom-made black leather bag based on her sketch. It was impeccably crafted, with the kind of attention to detail that only centuries-old luxury houses could achieve. Flattered, Birkin agreed to lend her surname to the design in exchange for a promise she could have one for free. The Birkin bag launched in 1984. At first, it was just another high-end handbag, but over the following decades, something shifted. The Birkin became a phenomenon, a status symbol so extreme that owning one signaled not just wealth but access to a rarefied world. Hermes deliberately limited production, creating waiting lists that stretched years. Prices climbed from thousands to tens of thousands to over $100,000 for rare materials. By the 2000s, it ranked as the most famous handbag on Earth. Jane Birkin treated it like the basket. She kept only one at a time, despite offers of more. "What's the use of having a second one?" she asked. Each bag was battered with use. Stickers, charms, scratches from being tossed around. She joked that a bag has no fun unless it looks like the cat has been sitting on it, and it usually has. The cat may even be in it. The weight proved real. Leather and hardware gave her shoulder tendinitis. She mentioned it lightly, as if the coveted accessory were only a stubborn tool. In July 2025, one of her used Birkin bags, patched and personalized, sold at auction for around $10 million. The price reflected the life it had carried. Birkin never kept the royalties attached to the name. Hermes paid her a yearly amount, around £30,000, and she directed it to charities she supported. "I got Hermes to fork out for my charities once I saw the fortune they were making," she said. The contradiction suited her story. A figure who resisted material display sparked the ultimate luxury object, then undercut the spectacle by treating the bag casually and giving away the money. In 2015, an animal rights organization exposed cruel practices in the exotic leather industry, including how crocodiles were being skinned for Hermes handbags. Birkin immediately wrote an open letter requesting that Hermes debaptize the crocodile skin Birkin bags until the company adopted better ethical standards. Hermes quickly agreed to improve its sourcing, but Birkin's message was clear. She would use even her accidental fashion fame to push for conscience and change. The bag that bore her name had become one more symbol of her contradictions. Practical, yet glamorous. Simple, yet expensive. Accessible in concept, impossible to obtain in reality. It was everything Birkin herself was, approachable and unreachable at once, casual in appearance and profound in influence. Fashion is an industry built on youth. Models age out in their 20s. Actresses fight to stay relevant past 40. The unspoken rule is that relevance and beauty have expiration dates, and everyone knows when yours is coming. Jane Birkin ignored the rule entirely. As she moved through her 40s and 50s, her style continued evolving without losing its core. She cut her long chestnut hair short, a decision that would have devastated most women whose image depended on their signature look. But Birkin's signature wasn't her hair. It was her refusal to perform for anyone's expectations. She refused cosmetic surgery in an era when nearly everyone in her industry was getting work done. She let her face show age, let her body change naturally, and kept wearing clothes that felt right rather than clothes designed to hide time's passage. Her daily uniform shifted to baggy corduroy pants and oversized white shirts. She still mixed high and low, showing up to red carpet events in sneakers and slouchy blazers. But now, there was an ease to it that only comes from decades of not caring what critics think fashion editors kept referencing her anyway. In fact, they referenced her more. Designers who'd been children when she first arrived in Paris were now citing her as their primary influence. In 2016, Vogue declared that there is no living person more referenced in world of fashion than Jane Birkin. At 69, Hedi Slimane featured her in a Yves Saint Laurent campaign he personally photographed, calling her one of the iconic musicians who inspired his creative vision. The fashion world is not usually kind to older women, but Birkin had spent 5 decades demonstrating that style wasn't about following trends. It was about knowing yourself. She'd accumulated a lifetime of beloved pieces, and she wore them with the same unself-conscious grace she'd brought to everything else. The baggy corduroys and white shirts weren't a compromise with age. They were just the next iteration of her sensibility. "Keep smiling," she told an interviewer once. "It takes 10 years off." She was joking, but also not. Her playful, girlish charm never faded, even as her face lined and her hair grayed. She proved what the industry refused to believe, that a woman could age naturally and still be beautiful, still be fashionable, still be relevant. Her career endured too. She kept acting through the decades, appearing in mainstream films like Death on the Nile and Evil Under the Sun in the late 70s and early 80s. In 1985, she won a Best Actress award at the Orleans Film Festival for her portrayal of writer Catherine Mansfield. She released solo albums and toured performing Gainsbourg's repertoire well into her 70s. Her last concerts were in 2022, just a year before her death. She was still working, still creating, still showing up as herself. The only thing that changed was that she got better at it. Questions often arise about substance beneath fame. Birkin answered in public. As a young woman in London, she joined protests against capital punishment. In 1970s France, she supported the Bobigny trial, where a teenager faced prosecution after an assault and an illegal medical procedure. Birkin appeared in court to back her, adding visibility to a case that helped build momentum for legal reform on reproductive rights. In 2002, she marched against the far-right National Front when Jean-Marie Le Pen reached the presidential runoff. In later years, she joined demonstrations defending undocumented migrants and calling for environmental action. In 2018, she signed an open letter in Le Monde urging urgent steps on climate and biodiversity. In 2022, as protests grew after the death of Mahsa Amini, Birkin cut her hair on camera to show solidarity with Iranian women. This steady commitment to humanitarian causes aligned with her broader refusal to fit a box. She used her platform to support movements rather than products. The same insistence on personal truth that shaped her wardrobe guided her politics. When praised, she often downplayed her gifts. "I never felt I had particular talent," she once said with dry humor. Purpose showed through anyway. By showing up for what mattered, she encouraged others to do the same. Colleagues describe a habit of writing letters for causes that mattered and appearing in person when a letter was not enough. She lent her name carefully, preferring marches and meetings to glossy galas. The causes varied across decades, yet the stance read the same: human dignity first. Jane Birkin died in July 2023 at 76. Tributes arrived from across the world. The president of France called her a French icon, a marker of how fully she had woven herself into the country that adopted her. Her legacy reaches far beyond national borders. Birkin sparked something hard to label: a movement centered on style and authenticity joined together. Each time a young person puts on jeans and a white shirt and names it French girl style, they trace a line back to Birkin. Each time a luxury brand aims to balance practicality with glamour, they follow what some call the Birkin magic, the blend of the everyday and the exquisite, a whole advice industry on effortless chic, looking good without fuss, grew from images of a woman who did not fuss. Modern style figures from Kate Moss to Alexa Chung have taken cues from her uniform. Editors still place her on mood boards and trend maps. Vintage-leaning basics, natural hair and makeup, and the belief that clothes should be lived in all carry her fingerprint. Yet the heart of it sits beyond clothing. The movement celebrates authenticity. It asks for courage to be yourself in public when the world pushes for performance. It values contradiction: sexy and silly, chic and casual, famous and humble, rebellious and humane, without smoothing the edges. She showed that a sex symbol can also be a serious artist, that aging without intervention can pair with relevance, that a life free of material display can still influence luxury culture. The most stylish act often comes from living first and editing later. In 2023, the French singer Mika released a tribute song simply titled Jane Birkin. Its lyrics captured what she'd meant to generations of people who'd never met her: being yourself, expressing yourself, daring to be daring, while remaining poetic and artistic. That was the movement. Not a set of rules to follow, but permission to stop following rules. Not a manual for looking chic, but an example of what happens when you stop performing and start living. As one retrospective aptly noted, the complexity behind the style made her truly authentic, a bit mysterious, and absolutely timeless. From a shy London girl to a scandalous Parisian icon to a global symbol of individuality, Jane Birkin's journey proved that the most influential people are those who never set out to influence anyone. They just had the courage to be themselves, publicly and completely, even when that self was contradictory and imperfect and impossible to package neatly. The movement she created lives on every time someone chooses personal style over perfection. Every time authenticity wins over curation. Every time someone looks in the mirror and decides that being themselves is enough. That wicker basket she carried through Paris in the 1970s was never just a bag. It was a statement written in straw and indifference. I am not what you expect. I will not play by your rules. I will carry my life in something honest. The world spent 50 years trying to decode that statement, trying to bottle it, sell it, teach people how to recreate it. But you can't teach someone to be Jane Birkin any more than you can teach them to be themselves. You can only show them that it's possible, and that, more than any fashion trend or luxury handbag or iconic photograph, is what Jane Birkin gave us. Not a blueprint for style, but proof that the most revolutionary thing you can do is simply, completely, unapologetically be who you are.